I'll never forget 1995 when God called me to start a church in McKinney, Texas. It was the closest thing to an audible voice I've ever heard. And I went to my mentor, Gene Getz, pastor of the church that's now called Chase Oaks, and we said, let's go. And we announced it in spring of 1996. We said, let's take a year to plan it, build it. Had our kickoff meeting in June. It kind of seems silly now in retrospect. We called it our Saddle Up meeting. We had that song, Stephen Curtis Chapman, A Great Adventure. We're going to go on this great adventure with God. I had written on a big board, 1 Corinthians 5:7, we live by faith and not by sight. And we said, what would it look like to lead a church by faith? So we started praying. We got phone books. Yes, there were phone books back then. And we took pages out, and everyone prayed through pages of the phone book. Our goal was to pray for every person in McKinney, Texas, every business, and I think we did. And then we did a 300-day prayer countdown. And by faith, we started with 2 services. By faith, we started with a multiple staff. People got jobs and moved in with their parents and raised money, and we're just in it to reach lost people. Our thought was a church for the unchurched, for people that were going to church nowhere, and God's done it. I look back and yes, we did some things right. Yes, we did a bunch of stuff wrong. God's done this. We started with several hundred people, and then God grew it, and we did our first capital campaign before we were a year old for property, and God provided it. And old Texas gentleman said, I understand the church wants to trade for my property. And on a handshake, he provided for us over 40 acres of property at a great price. Never even had a contract till the day we closed. God did this. And then we raised money for our first building and a gym, combo worship center, and that filled up. And before that 3-year campaign was over, we started another one for our worship center. And then 9/11 hit, and we had to pause the whole thing. Economy fell apart. A year later, we said it's time to move forward. And we looked at what it would take. It would take a little over $600,000 in cash. That was a mountain so big we didn't think that was possible. But we began to give and lead our people, what we called leap of faith, a marker moment in our church's life, one of the biggest steps of faith I've ever been involved in. And we were counting it all for one Sunday in cash, and that Sunday it was either go or no go. Either the $600,000 is there and we go, or we just stop. And when we counted all that money that Sunday, it was over $1 million in cash. I was crying, we were cheering, the worship was just out of control because God did this. This is what God's doing. Then in 2010, we believe God led us to a fresh vision to multiply. We got to change the name of our church, and so we changed from McKinney Fellowship Bible Church to Christ Fellowship, so we could multiply to reach more people by being in more places. And so we started services in Spanish, and that's been growing and growing to be one church, 2 languages, and an online campus, and services in the jail, and in a rehabilitation center, and a campus north of us that we turned into a church plant. God's been moving in our lives, and it feels like we've just begun. This year, in 2017, we'll celebrate our 20th anniversary. And I think we've just laid a foundation as we're casting the vision for the next 10 years of what we believe God will do. And what a thrill to be part of it, to play the small part that I get to play, to be part of what God's doing at Christ Fellowship.